All right, we seem to have leveled off here. So we're going to go ahead and kick it off. Once again, welcome to the first of Dartmouth's summer series focused on social change through policy. My name is Catherine Hare. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions in the Undergraduate Admissions Office at Dartmouth College, but thrilled to be joined tonight by Professor Muirhead and three current Dartmouth students who are going to be talking to you a little bit about their experience at Dartmouth. So just a quick introduction to our wonderful panelists. Dr. Muirhead is a professor in the government department and last year served as the interim director of the Rockefeller Center, which you're going to hear a lot about tonight. He teaches American political thought and has written about conspiratorial thinking and American politics in a book called A Lot of People Are Saying, The New Conspiracism and the Assault on Democracy. Dr. Muirhead is joined by three current students, as I mentioned. Amanda is a 22 from Chicago. She is double majoring in African and African American studies and sociology. Rick joining us from Holland. So it is actually 1 a.m. where Rick is right now. Thank you for being here, Rick. Rick is a 21, grew up in the Netherlands and is double majoring in government and economics. And Sasha, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask, is it Kokushinsky? Did I get it right? Awesome. He is a 22 from Colorado, planning to double major in economics and mathematics. I would ask for those of you who are tuned in to please use the Q&A feature as we go. We're going to incorporate your questions during our 45 minutes together. I know Amanda has a study group at 7:45, so we do have about 45 minutes together. And then we will give you information to tune in to summer series numbers 2, 3, and 4 every Thursday night in July. So with that, I will hand it off to our wonderful panelists. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just step in here. My name again is Russ Muirhead. I teach in the government department. I'm a professor in the government department, and I've been the sort of visiting director, the interim director of Rockefeller Center for the last year. The Rockefeller Center for Public Policy that engages students in all kinds of ways. It has a public policy minor. It has all sorts of programs for students who are interested in politics and social change, even when they're not interested in majoring in those things, like studying government or public policy. So we want to talk a little bit tonight about the kinds of things that you might discover at the Rockefeller Center if you come to Dartmouth. But let me start before turning to the specifics and the experience of these students, Sasha, Rick, Amanda, before engaging them about their particular experiences at Dartmouth and the Rockefeller Center. Let me start just by saying a couple things about the topic for today, social change in public policy. And I want to say something about it because what I've been seeing in my students for a long time now is a kind of despair about the formal institutions of government, the kind of institutions that you study if you take civics. The institutions that make up, that are described, say, in the United States Constitution, the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judicial branch. What I see in so many students is a sense that real change is not going to happen through formal politics, because formal politics is broken. Formal politics is corrupted by money, by parties, by special interests. And if you really want to get something done, you got to do it outside of the institutions of public policy and formal politics. You've got to start a movement. You got to get active. You got to hit the street. And maybe it's through demonstration. Maybe it's through pressure. Maybe you start a nonprofit. A lot of my students think that nonprofits are more effective at generating real social change than old-fashioned public policy, that is legislation. And so I think there's a way in which public policy is sort of on the defensive. Here we are, the summer of 2020, and the appetite for real change is felt more urgently than I think at any time since I was born, at least in the United States of America. There is a sense that there have been problems hiding in plain sight, such as the problem of structural racial discrimination, and that this kind of problem is no longer acceptable. People who for one reason or another, maybe didn't like it, but also accepted it, finally find it intolerable. And so there's a quest for real social change now. Can that social change happen through public policy? Or is our apparatus of public policy making so broken that it really can't? That's, I think, one of the big questions in the background and of this topic. And And I'd like to kind of bring it out and engage it a little bit as we talk about some of the things that happen at Rocky. Because we're ultimately interested not just in Rocky and the particular programs it offers, we're interested in changing the world and making it better. So, so with that, let me just turn, I want to thank Sasha, Amanda, I want to thank these students. Amanda, you have a study group in 45 minutes. You've got better things to think about than this. So it's so generous of you to join. Rick, it's 1 a.m., 1:15 a.m. in the Netherlands. And Sasha, I know that it's really beautiful out in Colorado this time of year. So to join us is a really generous thing for each of you, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. In July, no less. Rick, let me just turn to you first. What year are you, and how did you come to bump into the Rockefeller Center and have something to do with it?
Yeah, well, thank you, Professor, for your remarks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I see there's someone from Ukraine joining us as well. I know the time difference is a challenge, but I'm glad you could all make it. My name is Rick. I'm a 21, a rising senior at Dartmouth College. I'm originally from Holland. And I came to Dartmouth for a number of reasons, which I can get into. But let me talk about the Rockefeller Center for a little bit first, because I think it's one of the most exciting places on campus. Most of you will be interested in policy and government and things related to that. And I think the Rockefeller Center really is a place where you can explore basically anything that you're interested in within those domains. And so for me personally, I've been involved at the Rockefeller Center since my freshman year, and I'm continuing to do so. And the programs that it offers are really specialized to make sure that students can get that benefit that they can't really get at other places. So, Professor, I don't know if you'd like me to. Sure.
Step in here. So you're a senior. You're going to be a senior.
I'm a rising senior. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've had something to do. You've been involved with the Rockefeller Center since your very first months on campus.
Yeah, basically. So I bumped into the Rockefeller Center. I think my first interaction with the center must have been an open house. And, I was, as students, we were all welcomed by the staff at the Rockefeller Center. And I think if there's one thing that Rocky is good at, it's having passionate people be engaged with things they're passionate about. And that goes for staff and students. And so during my freshman year, I found out about the first year fellows program, which some of you may have heard of. And I think it's a really exceptional program because it allows freshman students to intern in Washington, D.C. and live with a cohort of about 25 Dartmouth students and intern in different places. So this is one of the programs that I have enjoyed the most at Rocky. And by the way, if any of you have any particular questions about what I'm talking about, feel free to use the Q&A feature, and I'll try my best to answer those questions. But the First Year Fellow program, basically, it starts in the winter of your freshman year, where you take Public Policy 5. And this class is Intro to Public Policy, which I would recommend everyone to take, regardless of whether you're interested in the First Year Fellows program. And it really gives you a good introductory sense of what public policy making in the US is all about. And I think Professor Muirhead really had some great opening remarks talking about how it's not just a formal system. It's not just formal politics or formal public policy making. It goes beyond that. And I think that this public policy class is a good job at getting into that as well. And so for the program, you do your public policy class first, and then you apply to be a fellow. It's a competitive program. A lot of people apply. People seem to really enjoy it. And
you go to Washington, D.C. in your
you go to Washington, D.C. So there are
How long do you hang out in Washington?
What's that?
How long do you spend in Washington?
Yeah, so I spent my freshman summer in Washington. It's about
the whole summer.
It's the whole summer. And for freshmen, it can be difficult to find a meaningful internship their freshman year because you've just completed a year of college. And so what Rocky does, they pair you with an organization, and this could be a trade association, a nonprofit, a congressional office, and you get to work with them in choosing what organization you want to intern with. And you live in Washington for 10 weeks, which is a great experience. And your very first week.
Sign me up, Rick.
What's that? Sorry?
Sign me up.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, here's the thing that I want to say. If you go to Washington, I came from Holland. I had never been to the States before I came to Dartmouth. I committed to Dartmouth without having been on campus. And so it was a completely new experience for me. Now, coming to Washington and actually working there, it can be kind of overwhelming. But Rocky does a phenomenal job of making you feel welcomed in this foreign city. And it's 25 Dartmouth students, so you're not alone. And it starts off with a week of training. It's called civic skills training. And you basically learn everything you need to know about the professional workplace. So how do I, from anything from how do I dress to how do I engage with my supervisor, my colleagues, and how do I function well in Washington, and how do I take advantage of the great opportunities there are. And for any of you, my number one tip that I always tell people that are heading to Washington is make sure you go to the embassies, especially during the summer. They have some great events and parties, and you get to meet a lot of interesting people. And that's what Washington is all about, networking. So in addition to the actual internship that I took part of, I think just being in Washington, being able to engage with fellow interns, fellow people working in public policy, I think that's the most rewarding experience.
I want to come back to you, Rick. Well, maybe I'll ask you right now.
Yeah.
Did your time, I mean, thinking back to that first year fellows program, thinking back to Public Policy 5, the course you took in the Rockefeller Center in your first year, did those experiences make you more optimistic about achieving social change through public policy, or did you become more, I don't know, jaded or wizened?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great question. I would say both. I think it's inevitable when you get a better understanding of such a complex system that you tend to appreciate its difficulties a little bit more. And you tend to appreciate the hard work that people put in on both sides of the aisle and in and out of politics. And I think that's a really rewarding thing because it makes you understand the whole system a little better. So I have seen how difficult it can be to bring about change, how you could literally work for months on something and then it might not even go into effect. But at the same time, it has also made me optimistic because there are a lot of passionate people working in Washington and all over the country and all over the world really on these issues. And so I have become more optimistic too, that even as a student, you're able within an organization to make change. And of course you have to start small, and your first task as an intern will probably not be too glorious, but if you show up, if you do the work, then the work will take care of you. People will notice. I think that's very important.
Those are great words. So show up, do the work, and maybe the work will take care of you. Show up and do the work. I like that. Sorry to interrupt you. I want to come back to you.
No, absolutely.
I want to toggle over to our other, participants, and let me turn to Amanda. Rick was just mentioning internships in DC. You're sort of an expert on the Rockefeller Center's engagement with internships.
That I am.
Yeah, tell us a little. Could you tell me a little bit where first? Let's start out. What year are you? I know you mentioned it already, but and how did you come to find the Rockefeller Center?
Sure. So I'm a rising junior at Dartmouth. I've been involved with the Rockefeller Center kind of very similar to Rick since freshman year. So I also did D-Lab. I took Public Policy 5. No, I wasn't a first year fellow, but that was pretty much my introduction to Rocky. And by my sophomore fall, I'd been hired as an internship student staff assistant. So essentially what I do is I hold drop-in hours every week, and I help students find internships. I help them apply for internships. I help them secure housing for their internships, and I also do advising for funding. So the Rockefeller Center has funding that you can apply for any off term that you're pursuing an internship that's related to public policy or government or econ. And also we publish different opportunities weekly. So that was pretty much my introduction to Rocky, and I've fallen in love with it since. So yes, I am the internship expert, you can say, and a lot of people come to me for whether they're in very beginning stages of figuring out an internship or figuring out what it is that they want to do, or if they're more seasoned and they're just looking for us to fund their internships.
And this funding is so important, isn't it? Because these internships don't pay, and a lot of students need to earn some money on their off terms. How competitive is the funding? What do you need to do to line up funding?
So you essentially you fill out an application. I won't say that it's not competitive, because it is. We want you to have everything together. We want you to understand what it is that we're asking for from you, just as you're requesting our funding. We want to make sure that you're, one, that you've committed to finding an internship and that you've been in communication with your supervisor about what's expected of you. There's a work requirement that it has to be a full-time internship. You have to be off term, so you cannot be doing, so like since everything's remotely, you couldn't be doing classes and an internship remotely and still getting funding. You also have to we're very particular about who it is that we give funding to, but everybody's welcome to apply. We just want you to have everything together. We are not trying to turn you away. That is never our goal. We want everybody to be funded because we understand how stressful it can be to pursue an unpaid internship, but we also want you to understand this is a very serious thing and we're not just giving away money.
I like that. I love that. I mean, so it's available for people who really line up something worthwhile, and there's resources like people like you at the Rockefeller Center that help students put something worthwhile together, and that's really good. There are so many different programs at Rocky, and they go by letter names. We refer to them kind of by their shorthand initials. One of them is RGLP. What does RGLP mean, Amanda?
So RGLP is Rockefeller Center's Global Leadership Program. And, do you want me to talk about what it is or just the name?
Well, tell us what you know about it.
Okay.
What is it?
I participated in in the Rockefeller Center Global Leadership Program, which I'm going to refer to as RGLP because it is a tongue pull. I participated in that program this past spring, and it truly was awesome. We talked a lot about ethnocentrism, which is essentially evaluating culture from the structure of someone else's perspective culturally, which was really awesome. Plus, I got to bond with my cohort, and that particular program was interesting for me because as an American, we can have very specific views about what it means to be an American and what it means to be a functioning person in America, but that's not everybody's reality, and it doesn't have to be, and it's not fair that we even have those standards. So I think participating in RGOP made me so much more aware of what that meant. Like, I'm a Black woman. Being Black does not mean it's not the same thing for everyone in America, regardless of how you identify. And it was just very interesting for me to be able to put myself in the position of other people and to see America through their lens and to see the world through their lens, because it's not the same.
What I'm hearing you say is that intercultural understanding, the basis of that is interpersonal understanding.
Absolutely.
Understanding, and that RGLP kind of engages you in that project of understanding other people one-on-one.
Yeah. So we also, I'm sorry.
I'm curious about you mentioned bonding with your cohort. What do you mean? Especially since this past term you weren't all together in the red brick building that we call the Rockefeller Center. So how do you bond in a remotely taught term?
So it was, we would always have, RGOP has a 30-minute block before the actual 2-hour session that was reserved for dinners. So what we would do was we would still meet during that time, and we would essentially just debrief and talk about our weeks, which I really loved because, of course, I love RGOP, but it's nice to be able to know who it is that I'm in this program with, especially because we aren't face-to-face. And it's pretty weird that we're not weird because we've grown to love Zoom over the past couple months, but it was a very different experience for us to be talking to one another through the screen. So we would take that 30-minute time just to become more comfortable because you want to be as vulnerable as possible. And vulnerability can truly be achieved when you're comfortable with the people who you're with. You know them, you know their background. And by learning more about them, you kind of learn more about yourself and how we talked a lot about the different insecurities that we had. So it was very nice that we were able just to air that out and that was a safe space. So I miss my cohort, to be honest.
I mean, I love hearing that. And because when I think about my own ideal of what, college is, it's definitely about, we were talking in politics about the formal part of politics, passing laws in a legislature, and the more informal part of politics, which might be a movement, a group, it might be a neighborhood association, it might be 5 people who want to do something, getting together. And same thing in college. The formal part is the classroom. There are assignments, there may be lectures, there's requirements and grades. But the informal part is where so much learning and transformation happens. And that's talking over dinner, that's getting to know each other, that's revealing ourselves to each other and exchanging our thoughts, our feelings, ourselves. And I'm just so glad to hear you say that could actually happen in the spring term even though every student was in a different place. And it happened, the occasion for it was the Rockefeller Center and this group, the Global Leadership Program. And you know, did the conversations that started in those 30 minutes, did they continue on in the rest of the session?
Absolutely. So we just used the 30 minutes to get to know each other more personally, but that's essentially what we were doing all throughout our GOP. It's just that we would have speakers. So we would get the opportunity to interact, but it was more, so every time we'd meet, there'd be a different theme. So one of the themes was about ethnocentrism and ethno-relativism. And then we would have other ones about like, some of the topics were like culture shock and how to cope with culture shock. So essentially every meeting has a different theme. We would use that time to talk about things outside the theme that would still allow us to bond. But we still, of course, would get to interact throughout the sessions. And usually you will be in like small groups if we were in person, but since it was remote, we would go into different breakout rooms and we would tackle some of the different questions that we were asked.
Cool. I mean, it sounds really good. And I know, you know, I was just so impressed watching the staff at the Rockefeller Center figure out, you know, they just turned on a dime in mid-March. We all were really kind of, I mean, the whole thing just hit so quickly in March. There was that, you know, one day everything was like it always was, and the next day no one was coming back to campus. Everything was going to happen remotely, and we didn't know what hit us. And the staff and the faculty at the Rockefeller Center just, you know, like that, figured out how to offer these programs remotely. And you know, I remember thinking at the time, listen, it may not work. Let's just do our best. We'll just do our best. That's all we can do. Show up, as Rick says, and do your work. That's all we can do. So to hear your report, man, is so encouraging. It sounds like the real heart of the thing, which is students getting to know each other, getting, you know, overcoming their separateness and coming to understand each other and like each other, to bond, as you said, that could happen even amid this. I mean, it's a great thing to hear. So thank you. We're going to turn back to you too. Let me turn to Sasha. Hi, Sasha.
Hello.
Will you remind us of what year you are and how you came to, you know, learn about the Rockefeller Center and find it?
Yeah, I'd love to. So hi, everyone again. My name is Sasha, and I'm a 22. I've been answering some of the questions that you guys have been submitting in the chat, so feel free to continue asking those, and we'll do our best to respond. But I would say that, similar to Rick, I think a large part of the reason that I actually applied to Dartmouth was because of the various opportunities and programs offered through the Rockefeller Center. So ultimately, I think I applied to Dartmouth because, one, I want to be outdoorsy and sort of engage in the crunchy vibe that many of us do here at Dartmouth. But I think the more important reason was the fact that Rockefeller Center offered so many different opportunities. Aside from all of the ones mentioned and the ones that I'll be talking about, there are other programs that we won't get to today, such as studying abroad at Oxford, which is another program that's offered through the Rockefeller Center. But I would say that ultimately, given the various opportunities and guest speakers that Rocky provides, I think that showed to me that Dartmouth was the perfect school and it would be the perfect fit for my college career.
What program, of all the things that you've done at Rocky, Sasha, which one, could you pick one out as one that sort of means the most to you?
Yeah, I would say everyone has been meaningful, but I think two that come to mind are D-Lab and MLDP, and I can quickly go into both of those if you'd like.
What does D-Lab mean? What is that?
Yeah.
What is D-Lab?
Sure. So D-Lab, the acronym stands for the Dartmouth Leadership, Attitudes, and Behaviors Program. And I know this was a question that was asked in the chat, but this is another prerequisite to the first-year fellows program that Rick had mentioned before, which is another program that I was in. I was a first-year fellow at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. But ultimately, in this program, D-Lab, you're coming together with other students. There's about 100 students that engage in this program every year to sort of discuss the values that you have and how they impact your time at Dartmouth. What I think is really unique about this program, though, is the seriousness of the conversations that you have and the way in which you can actually change campus culture through these conversations. I think that as students, you sort of don't recognize the impact that your voice can actually have. And I think that through this program, you realize that even as an 18, 19, 20-year-old student, you have the potential to make a significant impact on a larger basis, whether it's in the world or more locally in regards to the college community. But I think that here in this specific program, you could have those tough conversations, but also see the plans that you make out of this program actually come to fruition. But I would say that another interesting program that I found to be extremely rewarding was the MLDP program. Now, MLDP stands for the Management and Leadership Development Program. And here, in addition to sort of Rocky's mission statement, you're sort of focusing on your leadership, team building, interpersonal, and also management skills. And this can be useful in a variety of different contexts, whether it's in an internship or a simple course project. But ultimately in this course and program, you're ultimately learning about sort of the differences that differentiate a manager and a leader. And you sort of engage in a personal leadership challenge in order to sort of improve the ways in which you can engage with others and sort of act as a leader and manager.
Let me interrupt you for a second, Sasha. You
Yeah,
do a
for sure.
personal leadership challenge.
Correct.
And
I can explain what that is.
Leadership challenge, Sasha.
Yeah, so I think the one that I submitted, and you can choose from a variety of different options, but ultimately you get to choose. I was the secretary on the mock trial team for that specific year. And a personal, I guess, leadership challenge that I had was serving on the executive board and sort of controlling the team, but to make sure that we had the most success going forward. So it was in terms of trying to delineate sort of what being a manager in that role entailed, but also what being a leader in that role entailed. And thanks to the program, we were actually able to qualify for the opening round championships for mock trial that year, which had not been accomplished since 2012. So I think the tangible effects of the program can actually be seen in some of your aspects of your day-to-day life.
That's great. And Amanda, you were also, am I right that you did that too? Did you do the same? So what was your personal leadership challenge, if you don't mind? Do you remember?
I do remember. So my personal leadership challenge, it essentially was for me to do more networking. I wasn't always comfortable with networking and just reaching out to people. So essentially what I'd done, I challenged myself to reach out to 3 new alumni every week using our alumni network that we have. And it actually was really cool because you can separate it by profession and region, and you can really filter and narrow down who it is that you want to reach out to. So I challenged myself with reaching out to 3 new people over the course of the 4 remaining weeks, or however many weeks were left after we had to turn in the personal leadership challenge. And that was awesome. I've been literally given internship opportunities and even some full-time offers, which for obvious reasons I can't take just yet. So that was pretty awesome because it challenged me to step outside my comfort zone while also learning so much from these Dartmouth alum, because if it's one thing about Dartmouth, alum always want to help you. So that was a challenge. I wanted to make myself more comfortable with utilizing the network that I worked so hard to gain access to.
And by the way, let's just go over it again. MLDP stands for what?
Management Leadership Development Program.
Management Leadership Development Program. We've also talked about RGLP,
which is Rockefeller Global Leadership Program.
Global Leadership Program. We've also talked about the First Year Fellows Program. Rick mentioned that. And each of these 3 things is what we call co-curricular program. Some people might say extracurricular, meaning these are programs that aren't part of the formal courses that people sign up for. Dartmouth students take 3 courses every term generally. These aren't one of your 3 courses. These are activities that you do outside of your courses. And they're very structured. They're expertly led and run. And they can really, I think make your Dartmouth experience profound. And so, they're the thing for, I think, the people here tonight to keep in mind is that these aren't the classes people take. There are courses that are also offered at Rocky. We mentioned Public Policy 5. Rick, I think you mentioned that. That's part of the public policy minor. Are any of you minoring in public policy?
I am.
Amanda? Sasha, are you minoring?
I also am minoring in public
Rick,
policy.
you're not a minor.
I'm the only one who's not, apparently. I already have a double major and minor, so it didn't quite fit in.
You can only do so much.
Exactly.
What I like about that, Rick, what I like about your example is it shows you can be very, very engaged in Rocky and not be necessarily a government major or a public.
I'm a government major, to be fair, but I do think, but you're completely right. I mean, I really agree with your point. I think I just answered a question in the Q&A. If you, with the example of if you major in biology, you can probably find some really interesting public health policy stuff at Rocky. And so, I think for anyone interested in anything, there's always a policy intersection if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah.
Would you, do we have time? Can I say something that I just wanted to bring up?
Yeah, please, Rick. Let's hear it.
So I think one thing that's really important to me, and I am sure that some of you who are on this call are have questions about this, but Rocky is a really inclusive place. And in terms of, I'm an international student, I'm a first generation student who relies heavily on financial aid. None of those things have prevented me from engaging with Rocky. None of them have made it harder for me to engage with Rocky. And so, I'm sure that there will always be challenges, and there are individual challenges, but I do think that Rocky and Dartmouth in general, in a lot of ways, does a good job at kind of leveling the playing field that way. And there were some questions that were brought up about study abroad programs. I was able to intern and study in Washington twice through the first year fellows program, but also through the government domestic study program. I was able to study abroad in London on the government program. And again, none of those things I felt, none of those things I was disqualified for, and none of those things I felt disqualified for, either for financial reasons or because of the visa situation or anything like that. So I just thought it was important to put it out there.
Has that been your experience too, Sasha and Amanda? Do you feel like the things that Rocky offers are widely available to everybody regardless?
Yes. No offense to Rick, but I hate Gov. You would never catch me in a government course. I don't like econ. I won't do that ever. I'm taking a cross-listed course with Gov right now, but it's cross-listed, so that gives me a pass. But it definitely appeals to everyone, and I think if you look in the Q&A, I dropped a link to the different tracks that they have within public policy and just like Rocky in general. So it definitely appeals to everyone, because I knew for a fact that I never wanted to do anything related to government or economics, but here I am still very much so involved with Rocky. And I think that's the beauty of it. And that's why a lot of the programs are designed the way they are, because you don't really get to interact with people outside of your major as much as you like. And that's why MODP and RGOP and all of these other abbreviated programs are so awesome, because you get to meet people from all different pockets of campus.
I want you to take my class now just as a challenge to see if I can teach a class, like a Gov class that you say you like. So if you're in the fall, I'm going to be so happy. A couple of people have asked in the Q&A how you balance, courses with these really engaging, possibly very demanding co-curricular activities. Does anyone want to speak to that?
So a lot of the programs, so I'm a student assistant, and I've always built my own schedule because academics will always come first. Like, that is why we're Dartmouth students. We're there to go to school, to attend classes, and to do whatever academic responsibilities we've been tasked with. So I love that Rocky, the programs are always in the evening, so classes will always be over. They're usually in Central, so they're usually about 6 p.m. and they end at 8 p.m. So it's not too late for you to get out and still be able to do your other studying that you have to do. But I will say, as a student assistant, I've always had supervisors, and I'm on my third supervisor now. They've always been very understanding of my schedule. So they want you to be the best you possible, and that comes with you being able to design your schedule and them being flexible and them being understanding and knowing that class will always be our number one priority. And that's something that I love. Even now that we're working remotely, I've still been able to design my schedule, and you're given plenty of time to complete different tasks that you're asked to do. You'll never be asked to do something with less than a week's time to get done. So if you manage your time efficiently, everything will work in your favor.
I mean, one thing I've noticed, thank you, is that Dartmouth students are very, very busy. And by about week, our quarters are about 10, 11 weeks long. By week 7 or 8, people are tired. They don't slow down any, and they don't seem to sleep any more than they were doing in the first weeks of the term, but they get tired. It's a high energy thing being a student at Dartmouth, and I think it's kind of amazing to me how much people do and how well they do it in spite of doing. A number of people have kind of asked whether they have to minor in public policy to be part of Rocky. And let's just clear that up right away. I've tried to say it already. You don't have to. You don't have to. There are about 25 minors, but there are hundreds and hundreds of students who are doing the programs that Rocky offers. So you don't have to be if you're a public policy minor, then you take the sequence of classes in public policy that's offered. You can also take those classes without minoring in public policy. You can take public policy 5, as Rick did, without being a minor. And so let's just clear that up right away. A couple of students also kind of asked about whether the small town of Hanover limits your ability to get real world internships and real world experience. Sasha, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I was also, I think, hesitant about Dartmouth in the sense that it is in sort of Hanover, and I think one would think that it would be hard to find internships. But I think that's something that Amanda mentioned earlier, is the fact that with Dartmouth alumni, they love to connect with you and love to host interns. And besides the Rockefeller Center, Dartmouth as an institution has a number of different resources in order to provide you with internships. There's a number offered through the Rockefeller Center, obviously, but there's also ones offered through other organizations, such as the Center for Professional Development. On campus, it's known as the CPD. And I have been able to find a number of internships both through Rocky and through the CPD. And for all of the leave terms that I've had, I actually have been able to find an internship for each one without any sort of difficulty. I think another way in which this sort of speaks for itself is, even though sort of I'm a 22, I'm a rising sophomore, I will be taking a gap year in this upcoming year. And I will essentially have 4 off terms. And I'm currently in the process of finding an internship for every single off term that I have. So I'm looking for 4 for the upcoming year. And it should be finalized in sort of 2 weeks, but I believe I will have an internship for every single term. And that's all thanks to the Dartmouth alumni and their sort of commitment and connections to Dartmouth, but it's also thanks to the resources that we have here on campus.
Wow. As we kind of move into and thank you so much for typing out answers to the various questions that people have been asking throughout this. I really appreciate you doing that. I hope your answers have been accurate.
They've been great. I'll tune in and say they've been.
Oh, good. But I answer a lot of questions without being completely certain of the answer, so it's okay if you're 80% accurate. I'm just kind of curious about the big picture as you think about, if you look ahead, and I know all of you are still in school. Rick, you're the one I think who's coming in as a senior this year, if I remember correctly. What are you going to take away, do you think, from your engagement with the Rockefeller Center as you step out into the world? Can you put your finger on a quality, an outlook, something you learned that you think you're going to keep with you as you go forward in life?
Yeah, I can take that if that's okay. I think Rocky has done a lot for me in terms of kind of building not just the confidence, but also the familiarity with the professional workplace, in particular in public policy, and just being able to go out there and do your thing, whether that's networking, whether that's reaching out to people. I'm doing a remote internship right now with a trade association, and the reason I got this internship is because I reached out to a Dartmouth alum who's a pretty high-ranking former government official, and it's because of Rocky that I was able to get that opportunity. And I think the programs, the leadership programs, will kind of give you the ability to work in a professional environment without being worried about whether you're doing a good job. Like, you're able to focus on your actual work. You don't have to worry about how do I engage with this? How do I, you don't have to worry about things as much. And so I think that's very valuable, and you get a kind of a head start on, I think, a lot of other people who might not have had that experience. So the leadership programs, the internships themselves, just being able to feel comfortable in that sense. I think that's very important.
Confidence, that's a huge thing.
Absolutely.
That with more confidence. Anyone else want to second that? How did Rockefeller affect your confidence, Sasha or Amanda?
I can go. I think that through the various programs that the Rockefeller Center provides, you ultimately feel, I would say, more prepared for the real world. And I think that especially through sort of the stress that accompanies a regular academic term, like you were mentioning, you can sometimes feel overwhelmed. But during my internship freshman year, I felt that my internship was a piece of cake compared to all of the sort of academics and extracurricular activities I was involved in here on campus. I think it just shows you that when you go out into the real world, you will be prepared for whatever is thrown at you, and that the experiences that you have at Dartmouth will ultimately prepare you for that. So I think it sort of provides more of like a less stressful experience for your remaining time, in the sense that you feel that you can actually implement tangible change in the world without sort of feeling that stress and that sort of overwhelming nature that might sometimes accompany that specific thought.
What do you think, Amanda?
Well said. I couldn't have put that in any better words. I will say that it's definitely, Rocky has definitely allowed me to come out of my shell. And in learning that Rocky wasn't just for government and econ majors, it made me even more comfortable with being me. So like now, everybody in Rocky knows me, like all the staff know me, and I'm just becoming more familiar with the student staff assistants. And that's been awesome too, because now that I'm comfortable with it myself, people are comfortable in trusting me, and that's how I get picked to do different things, like being on the panel, or like when people know if they need something, they can come to me. Like I'm everybody's go-to, and I love that, because me being more comfortable with myself has made people comfortable with having me around and being able to know that I can get things done without having to be watched or micromanaged. Like that's actually an awesome feeling. So I thank Rocky for that.
That's good to hear. You know, there's another question I saw just pop up, and it's a really important one in today's world. How do we handle the clash of rival interests and ideologies, even as we talk about and think about public policy and study it at Rocky? Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, not everybody. The first thing you learn in politics, the reason there is politics, is because people don't agree.
Well, I don't think we have time to cover that. That's a very big question. But wow, yeah, no, it took me a second to kind of internalize that question. But I think, I mean, it's a good point. I think someone just asked how you can get politically involved on campus. And there are a lot of student organizations. There's the college Democrats, the college Republicans, but also the Dartmouth Political Union, for example, that allows you to get engaged with government on a local level without kind of losing the bigger picture. And I think that's very important. And I think the best way to kind of navigate those differences politically is to be able to understand what people are saying, and to understand where people are coming from. And you might not agree with them. I come from a country where there is not the political divide that exists in the US. And so for me, as a, relatively speaking, as an outsider, it's been really interesting to observe the US political process. And I personally, what I find most effective is to listen to people, and to make sure you listen to the other side, and not just paint them off as the opposing party, but listen to their ideas. And like I said, you might not agree with them, but I think you'll come away with some interesting thoughts, and then you can engage in debate. And I think that's, especially on a college campus, that's something you want to do. You want to engage with people. You want to grab dinner with a friend of yours that you don't agree with politically. And I've done this many times. I would have a 2-hour-long dinner with a friend whose politics I didn't agree with a single thing he said. But it was super fascinating to just hear his thoughts and to engage. And as long as you can do that respectfully, I mean, obviously that's the key thing, right? You need to be able to do it respectfully, and it needs to happen in a respectful way. I think that's the number one rule. But as long as you can do that, I think it's great to engage with all of that.
And I think, when I think about the work that the Rockefeller Center does as a professor, and when I think about the relationship between what we call the co-curricular, extracurricular parts of Rocky and the curriculum, what I'm hoping for is that the kind of thing that Amanda was describing earlier, where the 30 minutes before the program starts, where you talk and you exchange and talk about your week and you bond, that this foundation of affection, of just liking each other, knowing each other. And you mentioned, vulnerability, revealing ourselves to each other without fear, with confidence, as you said, Rick, that's the foundation for being able to explore real disagreements in an open-minded and curious way. And we might, at times have debates where two views, clash and somebody tries to win the debate. But what I'm really after in the classroom isn't so much debating but genuine understanding, genuinely understanding people who don't think and feel and experience the world exactly the way you do, and who might disagree with you. And if we can succeed at that, if we can take that foundation of affection and mutual understanding and respect and create an opportunity for an open-minded engagement of real differences, then I think there's a lot of hope, I think, for you that you might go out into the world and, as we said at the very beginning of this program, change it. Amanda, I know you have a study group, and I don't want to make you late for that.
They pushed it back just for me. It's okay.
Oh, okay, terrific, terrific. Well, I'm glad to hear that. The last question maybe that I just want to ask each of you is, when you think about yourselves in the future, do you have an idea of what kinds of things you might do, and how you might locate your energy in the world to help improve it and change it? Do you have any feel for the kinds of things you hope to do after you graduate is the question? Or is that too far off to imagine in a concrete way? Sasha?
Yeah, I think it probably maybe is a little bit too far out, especially considering that I'm taking a gap year. But I do think that I want to pursue law school after Dartmouth. And if that doesn't end up happening, I would likely pursue a career in finance or consulting.
Well, those sound law school in particular sounds like a great profession for people who think a lot and care a lot about society and politics. And Rick, this is your last year at Dartmouth. Can you imagine yourself a year from now? Where do you see yourself?
Well, not quite. I try to not think about that too much yet, but it's the one question that I have difficulty with answering. But it's a good one, and I think it's important to look ahead. Same time, not to get too overwhelmed, to make sure you still take care of the work in the present. But for me personally, I think Dartmouth has prepared me well to. I feel confident whichever particular career or path I decide to take, that I'll be able to do it well. And I think Dartmouth has really been a huge contributor to that. And so more concretely, I'm planning on getting some work experience and hopefully getting an MBA and working in a field that can kind of that sits at the intersection of economics and government. I think that's where I want to make a change. And then you're coming back to your general remarks. I think ultimately, and this sounds cliche, but I want to do something that actually helps people's lives. That's not just something that earns my paycheck, but where I'm able to make a difference and contribute in one form or another. But to be honest, for me, whether that's going to be in the US or here in Holland, or I have no idea. But yeah.
I appreciate that. And if it is a cliche, it's a very compelling one.
Right.
Amanda, you described yourself as a rising junior, but our people here should know that you're really still in your sophomore. You're doing the sophomore summer. Is that right? So you just finished your second year at Dartmouth, but most of our sophomores come for the summer after their sophomore year. So you're now in your fourth consecutive academic term.
Yes.
And
yes, I'm tired.
I know. I was going to say, it's not fair to be asking someone in your position what they're going to do after they graduate.
Well, I know exactly what I'm going to do after I graduate. So I'm going to take a year to work. I want to do human resources, and I also want to get my MBA. So I'm going to do both. I'm going to take a year working in whatever company I choose as an HR professional, and then I'll take the 2 years off to get my MBA and return to that company or go to a different company, depending on how things go. But I'm going to start applying my senior year at Dartmouth. Wow, it feels very weird. I feel like I just started Dartmouth yesterday, but I'm still going to apply. I'm just going to defer I forget whatever you call it, but I'm going to defer going until the year because I need time to myself. Dartmouth, I love it a lot, but it can be very rigorous. So I just want to take the year to work.
I'll tell you, whatever company that is, it's going to be very fortunate to have you, no doubt. And I love that you know what you want to do. It sounds like I'm inspired. Sounds like a great thing. I think we're at the end of our program, and I really want to thank you, Rick, Amanda, Sasha, for joining us this evening, for sharing your experience about your time at Rocky. and your time at Dartmouth. And it's really great to hear your voices and hear you describe things. It's more compelling, I think, than any brochure or any professor really could put it. So here we are. It's July, and the world in many ways is in trouble. It's hard to predict how things are going to be 2 months out, 6 months out. At a personal level and a professional level, everything's been disrupted, and again, I think in the midst of what is a pandemic, there's also a more urgent sense than ever, especially in this country, in the United States, that things really need to change, and to have the qualities of character and the qualities of mind that empower you to contribute to making that change is one of the fundamental goals of Dartmouth College, regardless of what students major in, regardless of what their primary interests are. And that's the fundamental purpose of the Rockefeller Center. And I'll tell you, nothing can convince me more that we're doing okay than listening to students like you describe your experiences authentically and honestly. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for joining us this evening. It's a real honor to be able to present this little part of our campus to you, and I personally wish you very well in your last year in high school, and in the process of applying to universities. I happen to be of the kind of, I suspect, unusual view that it doesn't matter where you go, it just matters who you are, and so bring who you are to wherever you go. And as Rick said, show up and do your work. My best wishes to you for a terrific summer. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. I will echo that thanks as well. Dr. Muirhead, Amanda, Sasha, Rick, thank you on behalf of everyone in the Office of Admissions. Thank you, prospective students, for tuning in. I hope this was helpful, and I put just some logistics. I put the link to register for the summer series on social change through policy, numbers 2, 3, and 4 in the chat. So if you want to continue those, we have different faculty and students presenting for you every week. So we hope to see you on Thursdays at 7 p.m. And Amanda and Sasha and Rick shared their contact information as well if you want to be in touch with them. So thank you all so much.
I put my email in the chat. If anyone wants to reach out with any questions, feel free.
Perfect. Have a great rest of your week, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.